Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week we've got a race C at Road Atlanta, and we've got a meta car that we haven't seen before. We also have an anti-meta car that we haven't seen before. Let's get into it. This week's anti-meta car is the RCZ, also known as the RCZ if you're speaking English anywhere outside of the United States. I know we say things weird. It's capable of passing the GTR in the straights, and it can definitely outbrake them too. It handles really well, you just have to be careful of the tires. The 2018 GTR was our anti-meta car 2 weeks ago. This week, it's the meta car. The RCZ is capable of some really good quali times. As you can see, there's a 0.2 right here. I got a 0.5, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. I say this every week, but I made some mistakes in my quali time. You'll be able to see them. I'm going to point them out so you can do even better than that. But despite the big mistakes, I was still able to crack the top 100. I'm getting a real sense of deja vu because there's only so many ways you can tell someone to start all the way on the left. But anyways, once we see this orange part of this wall, once we get all the way past it is when we're going to brake lightly just enough to get the nose tucked in to get ourselves to the apex. Now you can track out a lot more than I did, and you can probably actually carry a lot more speed because of it, but I also like to get all the way to the outside here so we can get a good approach. Depending on what view you use, the next apex might actually be completely blind by the time you need to turn in, so I focus on two things. The end of this curb here on the left, I make sure I turn in before that. And then the black marks on the ground, I try to use those as a guide because they do circle around directly where you want to go. Now you can go over the outside part of this curb, the blue and yellow part, with all four of your tires. However, if you do, it's probably going to destabilize your car. You'll have to modulate the throttle to make sure that you don't slide out or go off the track. I try to avoid it entirely with my outside tires. This is where I made my biggest mistake. I got on the throttle and allowed the car to rotate a little bit on the curb, which is totally fine. However, I should have lifted to get the car all the way to the left, so then I could be on the throttle for as long as possible. Instead, I lifted late. And when you lift late on a section where you can be on the throttle for a really long time, you're going to lose a lot of speed. Momentum is key here. You really don't want to put two tires in the dirt. However, it's better than having to steer way too much and slowing the car down by doing so. I want to get the right side tires entirely on this curb, and when they both are, that's when I brake hard. We turn in early here, and what we're trying to do is make it so our outside tires are barely touching, not on top of, that inside curb. The key to avoiding the penalty here is noticing that there's a thinner part of the curb that is separate from the rest of the curb, and that part is totally fine to drive over with your inside tires. Make sure you drive back in so you're not over the white line once your car is stabilized. Using the boards on the left side of the track are useful during the race, but when I'm doing my time trial lap, I like to use this precise spot on the ground right here. I like to give it full brakes, downshift to third, and immediately start turning in. We want to really hug this curb, and in fact, if you can go over that curb, if you hit it aggressively, it shouldn't bounce you off and move you off your line. This is another corner that's really tough for references, but this crack in the road is where I start braking. We're going to get down to second gear and we're going to follow the tire marks on the road. If you do hit this curb, it, just like the last one, isn't going to be too bad, especially if you're really aggressive with it. When you glance off curbs, it can kind of knock you off the line, but if you drive straight into them, really attack a curb, then it can actually make it so it's less of an effect on the attitude of your car. Getting a good exit onto this straight is really important during the race if you want to overtake anyone, so make sure you're not sliding those tires as you exit. Thank you to those of you who let me know that they're actually foot markers, not meter boards, at Watkins Glen. I think it's the same here. Brake hard right before you get to the 100 foot board, and what you want to do is downshift at a rhythm. Don't get to second gear too quickly because if you bounce it off the rev limiter, you're going to actually lose braking power. If you end up going over this curb or too much over the curb, you may need to modulate the throttle to make sure you don't bounce everywhere. Now I had to lift off right before I upshifted, which probably killed my momentum. If you try to do a wider line into that, it's really easy to lose time there too, so there's some compromises that have to be made to get up that hill cleanly with a good exit. I pause it here again to show you what angle you want to be at coming over the hill. If you're too far to the outside, your front tires are going to lose grip and you're just likely to go off the track entirely. So if you follow those yellow lines or the black tire marks on the track, then you're probably good to go. You don't have to go all the way wide either because most of these cars can make it around that corner without setting up super wide. Alright, now for the full speed run. Looking for the end of the wall on the left, once we get all the way past it, that's when we're going to hit the brakes. We'll be trail braking for a long time, but you can get on the throttle earlier than I did as long as you're not too rough on it. Setting up for this blind corner is key. Make sure you remember your references and try not to drive all the way over that curb. Lift here unlike what I did, so you can be on the throttle for a lot longer than I was. Monster truck that curb if you have to, use the curbs here, and remember exactly how much of this curb you can take without getting a penalty. That's super important. It's important to remember that these marks that you see on the ground are not going to be visible if you're following really closely to a car, so taking in as many references as you can instead of one specific one is really important for maintaining pace in a race. It's absolutely imperative to not slide the car as you exit that corner. Of course, that is the case with every single corner, but it's really incredibly especially important when there's a really long straight afterwards. If you lose your momentum, it's going to be multiplied and magnified by the time you get to the end of this straight. Again, we're going to brake right before the 100-foot board, and that might seem pretty late, but we can stay on the brakes all the way to the apex. Whether it's a lift or a changed line, you're going to have to make some kind of concession to make sure you can get up that hill without going on the curb, and we stay tight to the inside so we can make it all the way to the end of the lap. As a shameless plug for my Twitch channel, I actually stream the new races every single week, every single Monday, and we do all of them from the back. Not only is that just the most fun, and it's really good stream content, but it's a really good opportunity to test out the different anti-meta cars and see how they stack up against the many people who use the meta car, as well as other potential anti-meta cars. This ended up being one of the best races of the day, and I wasn't really expecting much. Cooper had done some research. Cooper was racing various cars for me, so was the rest of my anti-meta squad, my anti-meta task force, but Cooper gave me the idea to try this car. I had previously tried this car at the very beginning of the new BOP and the new physics update, and I wasn't able to drive it. I knew it was good, I just couldn't quite do it myself. So you can actually see me struggling a lot with it probably for the first half of the race. I was really lucky to be streaming at the time because Cooper and Vegeta both gave me tips on what gears to use in certain corners, and I think that really turned things around for me, and I really started getting used to the car by then. A lot of times when we race from the back, I like to make sure that I'm actually at the very back or at least close to the very back, but considering I was sandwiched by the meta car already, I figured I might as well just give myself a good shot to have a good race, and I just went for it. This whole sector is brutal by itself, but when you're following people really close, especially if you're using the bumper cam and you can't really see anything, it can be especially scary. One person already lost their race and drove directly off the track, and I was just happy, of course, that I didn't get caught up in any of that. My first impressions of the car were actually really positive. The dirty air, of course, isn't going to affect us very much if we aren't really up to speed, but even at these speeds, I should have felt it a little bit more, and so I was really impressed by the fact that the dirty air didn't seem to mess with this car too much. This straight, however, is the first true test to see exactly how well it's going to do against the meta car. Not only was there a meta car in front of us that had slip from another meta car, there was a meta car behind us that had slip from us. And I was very happy to see that not only was I able to get past him, but the other guy behind me wasn't able to get close to me. I had the benefit of being far enough away from that group of cars ahead that I could be super brave on the brakes, and I was also really surprised by how damn good the brakes are on the RCZ. I felt really bad for this AZR guy. He was kind of being bullied all day, and I'm pretty sure he crashed out of almost every single race, and I don't think it was all his fault. Sorry, AZ. As I talk about pretty frequently, when you're trying to attack a car who's defending and you also have someone attacking you, especially if they're both the meta car, it can get pretty sketchy, but I always trust Andrew Racing. He's wonderful. He's a former teammate of mine too, and I definitely trust Cobby. If he's going to defend, he's going to defend cleanly, so I really didn't have too much to worry about besides maybe losing a position, and that's fine. Now, this is the first time that we've actually been through the S's while in someone's slipstream at speed, and again, the car was not nearly as bad as I expected it to be. It was a little bit more difficult to place the car exactly where I wanted it to, but it wasn't as hard as with the other cars that I had tested so far. Now, what I had noticed here is that since Cobby had a penalty, we're actually pretty close to Samcor, and so if I could get a really good exit from here, use Cobby's slipstream, I might actually be able to go straight through him when he takes that penalty, and then get in the slipstream of the next guy by the time we hit the next braking zone. It can be kind of sketchy going straight through the Ghost, especially at that kind of distance, so we decided to go pull over to the side. Luckily, he stayed on the inside, and that meant that I could start attacking and trying to chase down the slipstream from Samcor. Also, big shout out to Samcor. We met him on the last stream, and now we're friends. I don't think I actually realized at this point that we were only 5.6 seconds behind the leader, and I think it was actually around now that I realized that I was not going exactly as fast as I wanted to. I definitely wasn't going as fast as I was with other cars that I had used, and I was very far off from the meta car. I made a really big mistake there. almost lost a position to Cobby right here, but decided to continue defending and trying to continue chasing down Samcor. That's certainly not the last mistake you're going to see from me in this race. I kept making mistakes. I kept making really bad decisions with where to place the car and stuff like that. But I did know that it felt good, and I had seen Cooper use it before. I had seen the pace that he could get out of it, so I was pretty certain that I was going to be able to make something happen with this car. I thought it was really important to make sure that we stay clean, especially after making that mistake. One, we don't want to slow down and ruin Cobby's race, but two, we definitely don't want to lose the opportunity to stay in Samcor's slip, and we don't want to then be eaten up by any other cars, because when you lose a place, there's kind of like a momentum to it, or I should say a lack of momentum. It usually slows you down so much when you lose a position that other people can then attack really easily, and then they can do the exact same thing to you. Coming up is something I actually see a lot from friends, a lot of my friends that I make through streaming, and a lot of people just don't want to ruin my momentum or ruin my race. But the funny thing is, the people who would usually like pull over and let me go are also the people who I most likely want to actually have a race with. I told Samcor too, if I trust you, then I'm going to definitely want to race you. It's kind of like in martial arts. I taught martial arts for 14 or 15 years, and a really big thing that you'll see between friends is a lot of friends just don't want to hurt their friend. A lot of people don't want to hurt each other, and it's because obviously they're friends. They don't want to hurt their friend. But the funny thing is, if you really want to help your friend, and if you want to benefit yourself, you've got to give them everything you can. It's not that you want to fight them as if they're your enemy, but you do want to give them the best opportunity to learn and learn how to defend against someone who is capable of actually doing harm. It's the same thing in racing. If you've got a friend who is really fast, especially a friend who's faster than you, give them everything you can. It's going to give them a nice challenge, and it's also going to be an opportunity for you to learn. This is not, however, to say that I don't appreciate it, because a free overtake is always welcome. On the other side of the coin, if there's someone who's much faster than me, instead of fighting them, I'm most likely going to let them by and then try to stick with them, maybe use their slipstream to my advantage to make sure that I don't lose any more positions. If I'm in a position where there are two people behind me, and I really trust the one person directly behind me, if I let them go, there's a chance that I can stick with that person and then avoid losing any more positions. If we just fight a lot, then we could both potentially lose a position to the third party, that third person that I was talking about before. Anyways, back to the race. Now, it took 3 laps for me to actually get within striking distance of Baston. Now, if you look at positions 5 through 7, you'll see that Samcor did lose 1 position to Sydney, but he maintained his position over Cobby. And so that's a really good example. As I'm talking, I realized that Cobby then passed Samcor. Either way, it took 3 laps for that to happen. Let's say we were on lap 10 of 12, and rather than fight me, Samcor just let me go. If he was able to hold off Cobby for that amount of time, then he would have maintained that position through the end of the race. So it's a really good example of why it's not always the best idea to fight with everyone. Now, like I said at the beginning of the race, it took me about half of the race to really get used to the car. I finally got a purple lap, and it wasn't a fantastic purple lap, but it was the fastest lap of the race. In line with that is also our second free position just from someone crashing out. This track is both still relatively new. I think it's only been used 2 or 3 times in the daily race rotation, and it's also just really tough, especially the curbs and the blind corners. It's really easy to crash out here, so we are already at podium. Now, sometimes the meta car is so powerful that unless you're in the meta car, you can't really do anything even when you're in the slipstream, so I was really happy that the RCZ was powerful enough to catch the slip and then, of course, get in front of the meta car. Now, I didn't actually remember this at the beginning, or even at this point that we actually know Baston, so I was kind of surprised that he just kind of let us go. But I don't know if it was because he wanted to not fight and not lose any more positions, or if he was just doing me a solid, just saying, hey, go for it, bud. It's okay. Your pace is a little bit better. But either way, appreciate it, Baston. Thank you, buddy. So here we are at the beginning of lap 10, and we only have Eves in front of us. Before the race, someone in chat had said that that's actually their main account, and I couldn't remember who it was, so I wasn't exactly sure who to be prepared for. It turns out it's Ross. If you remember our Super Formula race, Ross is the guy that took me the entire race to catch up to. Ross is a very formidable opponent, fantastic driver, and I could not remember who that was. So I was just focusing on my pace, trying to get up to him as quickly as I possibly could, hopefully preserving my tires, because it is possible, especially with MR cars, to burn your tires so much that they get sketchy. But either way, I definitely had my work cut out for me. We're going to do some jumping ahead, but here at the end of lap 10 on the back straight, we are a solid 3 seconds behind. Up later, we've cut about 6/10 from that. The next lap, about 8/10, but still out of slipstream range. Now, I've been setting pretty much the exact same pace, not the exact same pace, but a very similar pace, and that pace was close to the fastest laps of the race. He must have really been stepping it up because he actually put distance between us this time. Our final jump ahead. I'd made it almost to slipstream distance, so if I can maintain this distance between us by the time we got to that back straight, I should be able to make some kind of move. The weakest part about this car is probably the tire wear. It never actually gets really scary, so it still has my seal of approval. However, I wasn't really protecting my tires. I was kind of sliding everywhere. I was missing apexes, missing turn-in points, missing braking points, and so all of that stuff added up to me really chewing through these tires. So things did get a bit sketchy, especially when you're following close to someone, trying to attack and trying to make it through all those really crazy S-curves. But despite all that, we were only a half second behind and we were entering that back straight. In all fairness, the car he's driving might have actually been a really good candidate for the anti-meta car. As you can see, it's very powerful, and despite the fact that I got a pretty good exit and had that slipstream, he's still pulling away for the first half of the straight. Now, while my exit onto this back straight wasn't perfect, it was pretty good, and I'm realizing now that I'm going to have to get a very, very good, if not perfect, exit onto the back straight on the final lap if I'm going to at all be able to make a move on him. I wasn't exactly sure what to expect for the beginning part of the lap, but I definitely didn't think I was going to be able to make any moves on him leading up to that back straight. So my goal right now was to continue protecting the tires as much as I possibly could, stay as close to him as I could, and then just go for the move on the back straight or after that back straight. When I'm following behind someone, I sometimes just try to stay off their line rather than stay directly behind them. One, because the slipstream can bring me a lot closer than I want to be, and I want to maintain a safe distance. As much as I want to be within striking distance at the right time, I don't want to be directly behind him or really close to him until that moment. I felt that right about now is the perfect time to attack, so I was going to try to stay within his slipstream, brake late, get on that throttle as early as I could, and just get as close to him as I possibly can, being as aggressive as I could, while also making sure that I get a good enough exit here to hopefully get close enough to make a move on that last braking zone. Now, luckily, I did get a better exit than I had last time, and it looked like his exit wasn't quite as good. I think he might have been defending into it. I didn't know if he was going to go inside or outside, so I was going to wait until I made my move clear, and it looks like he was defending on the inside. I trust him, or at least I thought I did, so I did go for an outside move, and he gave me space. And if someone gives you space, you definitely have to give them space. And in doing so, since he knew that he was going to have the outside line there, I think he did that strategically so he can maintain that position, and that was really good. That was just such a good race. That's the kind of race that you can't really be mad at when you don't win it. Only a 10th down. He also started close to the back, and when I found out who it was, I was really happy. It's always good having a really good battle with your friends, and you can't win every one of them. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave any questions you have in the comments below. Every single week, I make one of these anti-meta guides. As long as there's a meta car to fight, we will find the anti-meta car.